the Buddhist Council of St. Louis, of Greater St. Louis, is sponsoring this event. The Buddhist Council is a organization comprised of over 20 Buddhist groups in the St. Louis area. And it has been, it's now in its 25th year. There are events throughout the year that are sponsored by the Buddhist Council, and in the spring, traditionally we have an event focused on socially engaged Buddhism. In recent years, we have settled on the topic of global peace and preventing nuclear war, and that seems particularly relevant now at a time when we have the largest ground war in Europe since World War II going on, and we also have daily horrifying news from Israel and the Gaza Strip. So we will be talking today on the topic of global peace and global governance. We have two eminent speakers who have, in their own way, devoted their lives to advocating for measures to accomplish global peace. And I will turn the introduction of the speakers over to Reverend Rosan Yoshida, who has known them both for a long time. Reverend Yoshida?
Yes. Good afternoon. We extend our appreciation to all of the participants who have joined today's event on the greatest global agenda, on which is based on the global critical issues of the global ethic and global governance. The Buddha said that all beings are karma owners, karma machines, and karma refuged, requiring nirvana, no end of karma, and awakening. He prescribed a fundamental ethic as precepts and a harmonious society, sangha, community. Our first topic, the global ethic, is based on the Buddhist 5 precepts and the common ethical rules of the 10 Commandments. If everyone observes these, we all can have holy, wholesome, harmony, health, and happiness without wars, much less nuclear holocaust. Our second topic, global governance, is the most urgently needed social order of our age. It will allow us to go beyond egoism, individual, national, or of species, to solve the global problems of nukes, wars, climate change, etc., and to establish global peace. I met our first speaker, Dr. Shrenzok, at Dr. Hans King's Global Ethic Foundation in Tübingen 3 decades ago, along with other associates there. This meeting is a very dear, fond, and vivid memory in my life, and it was the source of my aspiration to promote the global ethic and to found the Japan Global System Ethic Association. Dr. Shrenzok became the head of the Global Ethic Foundation after Dr. King passed away in 2021. and he continues his work of promoting the global ethic in that road. Dr. Shrenzok, born in 1958, studied Catholic theology and Indology. Since 1984, he has worked with Professor Dr. Hans Kuhn until his death in 2021. Among other projects, he was Kuhn's collaborator on a multi-year research project on Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and on the 7-part multimedia project, Tracing the Way, Spiritual Dimensions of the World Religions. In 2015 to 2020, he edited the Hans Kuhn, his 24-volume collected works. Dr. Shrenzok is Secretary General of the Global Ethics Foundation, founded by Dr. Hans Kuhn in Tübingen, Germany, in 1995, which Dr. Shrenzok has led since its inception. He is also a member of the board of the Swiss Global Ethics Foundation in Zurich, Switzerland. Dr. Shrenzok is the author of several publications on world religions and ethical issues. His own research focus is on the religions of India, especially Hinduism. In 2023, he received the Hans Kuhn Outstanding Contribution to the Global Ethics Award by the Parliament of the World's Religions, Chicago. Dr. Shrenzok, please.
Dear Rosan, dear friends, thank you very much for this kind introduction. It's a pleasure and it's an honor for me to introduce you today to the Global Ethic Project, to which our friend Rosan felt connected from the beginning. And I thank you, dear Rosan, for making this the topic of our meeting today. The Global Ethic Project is inextricably linked to the name of the Swiss theologian Hans Kuhn. As you may know, Hans Kuhn was one of the few world-famous Christian theologians of the last century. He was born in Switzerland in 1928 and grew up there. In April 2021, in the age of 93 years, he died in Tübingen, Germany, the city in which he had been living since the 1960s, researching and teaching for over 30 years as a Catholic theologian at the Tübingen University. I had the pleasure and honor of working with Hans Kuhn for a total of 37 years. Alongside several thousand articles and other publications, Hans Kuhn's oeuvre consists of 73 books. Most of these have been translated into several languages, and for decades, many have been regarded as standard works of Christian theology. Lots of people unconnected with either the Catholic Church or theology became aware of Hans Kuhn when, in December 1979, the then Pope John Paul II stripped him of his ecclesiastical teaching license, the so-called Missio Canonica. This was due to Kuhn's repeated criticism of papal infallibility and the absolutist system of the Catholic Church. But Hans Kuhn was much more than a church reformer. He was a religious cosmopolitan who began to travel the world at a tender age and explore non-Christian religions. Dialogue with people from non-Christian religions was to become his life's main focus. And Hans Küng was a visionary who realized very early on that the religions of this world can only make a contribution to a more peaceful, fairer world if they remember those ethical standards which unite us across religious and cultural boundaries. We're talking about the Global Ethic Project, the objectives of which were developed by Hans Küng at the end of the 1980s, and which since 1993 has also been part of the legacy of the Parliament of World Religions when it adopted the Declaration toward a Global Ethic, drawn up by Hans Küng. He spent almost 3 decades working to make the Global Ethic Project widely known and precisely specify its aims. To describe shortly the objective of the Global Ethic Project, Hans Küng often used the following slogan: "No peace among the nations without peace among the religions. No peace among the religions without dialogue between religions. And no dialogue between religions without global ethical standards." This slogan shows the Global Ethic Project is much more than an academic research project. From the beginning, it intended to develop into a global dialogue project about values and their importance to society and intercultural dialogue. This is the project with which Hans Küng is probably to develop his most long-lasting impact worldwide, since its aims go beyond the scope of theology and religion and address global society as a whole and the question of what holds it together. In his book, Walls to Bridges, The Global Ethic, Hans Küng writes, looking back: "At the time, many people considered the project to be purely utopian. But the idea of a global ethic is not an utopia. It is not a place of nowhere. It is a vision. It shows how a world, perhaps not an ideal world, but certainly a better world, could and can look. It is a vision for the future. We and all people who work together with us towards this aim are convinced that a commitment to promoting respect and understanding between cultures and a commitment to promoting ethical standards in society, in politics, and the economy, in learning and in education is desperately necessary. And the global ethic is a realistic vision, a vision which can naturally not be achieved overnight, but will take time." End of quotation. There are 2 events that directly paved the way for the Global Ethic Project and whose basic papers find their way in Hans Küng's book, Global Responsibility in Search for a New World Ethic, which is the foundational publication of the Global Ethic Project. First, in spring 1989, a UNESCO colloquium took place in Paris, at which Hans Küng presented his idea of no world peace without peace among religions to international scholars from all major religions and experts in international law for discussion. And second, in autumn 1989, Hans Küng gave a plenary lecture at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, where he also canvassed support for the Global Ethic Project's ethical goal from representatives from the fields of politics, economics, and the financial world. For without their involvement, all the demands made by the religions, as well meaning as they might be, would come to nothing. On November 9, 1989, the Berlin Wall came down, taking with it the Iron Curtain. Virtually overnight, completely new questions arose for the future of societies in East and West. In the fall of 1990, the German edition of Hans Küng's book Global Responsibility was published, with topics such as why we need a global ethos, why ethics, a coalition of believers and non-believers, ethics in the face of conflicting priorities of autonomy and religion, and world religions and global ethic. It addressed key questions of this era. The book prompts an unexpectedly large international response, and within a short time has translated into a total of 17 languages. As early as March 1989, so before the book Global Responsibility came out, Hans Küng gives talks at the universities of Toronto and Chicago. In Chicago, he learns that a second so-called Parliament of World Religions is planned for the year 1993. Back then, only a few people outside of Chicago knew what the idea of a Parliament of World Religions was all about. The first Parliament of World Religions had taken place 100 years early in 1893, alongside the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. At the time, Chicago-based lawyer Charles Caraboni had the vision of organizing an accompanying cultural program for the World's Fair to look at important issues of the day. The program also included a Department of Religion. For this purpose, a conference of representatives of major religions was to take place, referred to as a Parliament of World Religions. A total of 45 different religions, denominations, and organizations ultimately gathered at the Art Institute of Chicago with the bold purpose of ushering in an era of brotherness of religions and of understanding among nations through religions. This event, you might say, marked the start of the worldwide interfaith movement. In memory of this epoch-making event, a second Parliament of World Religions was convened to take place in 1993. During his talk at the University of Chicago, Hans Küng calls on those planning this commemorative event 100 years later at the same place to draft and announce an ethical consensus of religions for the first time in history. Hans Küng's challenge was taken up by the key planners at the Parliament of World Religions. In February 1992, the executive director of the Parliament traveled to meet Hans Küng in Tübingen. He asked him to produce a draft of a so-called Declaration Towards a Global Ethic for the 1993 Parliament. Together with selected experts from the different religions, Hans Küng prepared an initial draft of the text, which was then discussed and revised in an international and interfaith network of academics and religious representatives. From September 2nd to 4th, 1993, the Second Parliament of World Religions meets in Chicago. There, Hans Küng's text is discussed intensively and finally signed and adopted by over 200 selected religious representatives, with the Dalai Lama leading the way. Alongside the two principles of humanity and reciprocity, the so-called Golden Rule, the Global Ethic Declaration states the values of nonviolence, justice, truthfulness, and partnership at the core of a mutual ethic for humanity. In 2018, the Parliament in Toronto, the declaration is expanded against the backdrop of global discussions about climate change to include a section on the topic of ecological responsibility as a collective ethical demand by the world's religions. For Hans Küng, the adoption of the Global Ethic Declaration represents the breakthrough for his global ethic project. But Hans Küng is now 65 years old and soon to retire as professor. His academic future seems uncertain because without staff and associated funding, he cannot keep his intensive program of work going. At this juncture, a businessman gets in touch. His name is Count Gröben. He had read Hans Küng's book, Global Responsibility, and was enthusiastic about the objectives of the Global Ethic Project which are developed in it. Consequently, he made available a huge sum of money with which we were able to establish the Global Ethic Foundation in Tübingen in 1995, an institution that I still lead until today. Sometime later, I asked Count Gröben what motivated him to get involved. Then he showed me a small piece of paper with a short text on it and said, "This is what I've been guided my whole life." The text came from Mahatma Gandhi and bore the title 7 Social Sins. And these 7 social sins are: first, wealth without work; then, pleasure without conscience; knowledge without character; commerce without morality; science without humanity; religion without sacrifice; and politics without principle. These address challenges that the Global Ethic Project also seeks to answer and highlights methods for their social and political implementation. In the years that followed, a whole series of basic publications were gradually created relating to the Global Ethic Project in the context of politics, economics, education, and society. And Hans Küng traveled around the world as an ambassador for the Global Ethic Project. He was called on by the then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan to join a group of eminent persons and tasked with developing basic principles for a new paradigm for international relations based on shared values. Hans Küng makes the case for this in a statement before the UN General Assembly. At the World Economic Forum in Davos, Hans Küng repeatedly addresses questions of global responsibility in the context of religion, economics, and politics. And in front of religious representatives and interfaith meetings, he underlines the need of mutual ethical standards as a prerequisite for understanding, global cooperation, and peace. In addition, our Global Ethic Foundation organizes global ethic conferences in India, China, and other countries in order to learn how global ethic is being received in other religions and cultures, and how one can support global ethic from their perspective. At the universities of Tübingen and Beijing, global ethic institutes are emerging in which not only students but also practitioners from business and industry deal with questions of global responsibility in companies, in the economy, and in global society. An interesting project emerged in 1996 with the Interaction Council of former heads of state and government. This council was founded in 1983 on the initiative of the then Japanese Prime Minister Takeo Fukuda, with the aim of promoting and improving international cooperation. To this end, the Interaction Council develops recommendations for action that are presented to governments around the world. Former German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt became chairman of the Interaction Council. Like Hans Küng, Helmut Schmidt was also looking for universal human values. And like Hans Küng, he was also concerned with the question of the meaning of these values for global society. For this reason, from 1996 onwards, the Interaction Council worked with Hans Küng as a consultant on the draft of a so-called Universal Declaration of Human Responsibilities. Inspired by the Global Ethic Declaration of the Parliament of World Religions and models on the UN Declaration of Human Rights, this document shows that freedom and responsibility are inseparably connected and that rights always involve responsibilities. In the years that follows, Hans Küng and the Global Ethics Foundation, in cooperation with the Interaction Council, had made great efforts to propose and discuss the Interaction Council Declaration on an international platform. During this process, the following issues have arisen. First, a document perceived as a supplementation of the UN Universal Declaration on Human Rights directly provokes the opposition of activists for freedom of press and human rights activists, because the apprehension prevails that responsibilities will be played off against rights. Second, active politicians and statesmen tend to not appreciate the counsel of former politicians. With all due respect, they are obviously reluctant to support documents which were not generated by themselves. And third, you can only initiate a discussion on a document like a Declaration on Human Responsibilities on the platform of the United Nations, provided that you succeed in getting the support of some few governments of influence. In those days, this was unfortunately not the case due to the reasons named above. In the years that followed, the future of this declaration was discussed at several meetings of the Interaction Council, but unfortunately without concrete results. The last meeting of the Interaction Council was planned for 2020 in Malta. Due to the corona pandemic, this meeting had to be cancelled. Since then, our foundation has no longer had contact with the Interaction Council, whose future seems uncertain to me after the death of Helmut Schmidt in the year 2015. After this excursion into international politics, I would now like to conclude my talk with a very brief look at the specific work of our Global Ethic Foundation. The remit of our foundation, which was founded in 1995 and which I have run ever since, is to highlight ways in which this global ethic can be lived and be effective in our societies. Our foundation does this in 3 fields of action: research, education, and encounter. Let me say a few words about these. First field, research. When we speak about research, we are referring in the first instance to basic research which aims to understand and convey the shared ethical principles between religions and cultures even better. But research also means continually re-emphasizing and making people aware that many challenges, both within society and globally, have an ethical dimension. This was already highlighted in the 1993 Global Ethics Declaration. Since then, the number of global challenges has not decreased. We need only think of issues such as climate change, the global financial system, migration, or at artificial intelligence. The global discussions about these challenges and their ethical implications are complex. And to be taken seriously in these discussions, moral appeals are not enough. Instead, appropriate professional competence is needed, and for this, appropriate research is required. Second field, education. Right from the start, it was clear to us that the global ethic is above all an educational challenge, not just for children and adolescents, but also for adults. Where children and adolescents are concerned, our work focuses chiefly on schools. We work together with education authorities and in partnership with educational experts, we develop materials and workshop programs for schools and for lessons so that the global ethic becomes firmly established in school curricula. But in order not just to understand the global ethic, but also to experience it during the everyday school life, we help and support schools with developing a culture based on the values of the global ethic. These schools receive recognition from us in the form of a Global Ethics School Award. At a Global Ethics School, teachers, students, and parents learn with one another and from one another, and thus grow together into a community based on the global ethic values. The concept of global ethic offers an umbrella under which a value-oriented school culture supported by everyone is formed and lived. A different form of education takes place in our Global Ethic Institute, which we established in 2012 at the Tübingen University. It promotes the ability from business and industry. With it promotes the ability to speak and act ethically, not only among students, but also among practitioners from business and industry. With its links between academic research and teaching and considerations of business practice on the basis of the global ethic, this institute is unique. And the third field, encounter. Global ethic relies on encounters between people and can only develop as a result of people meeting and sharing ideas. This concerns questions of cooperation across cultural and religious boundaries, and it concerns questions as to how we deal responsibility with society's main challenges. There are no easy answers to these questions. They have to be sought and developed over and over again in joint discussions. To this end, our foundation offers a wide variety of events formed to bring people together from as many areas of our society as possible, at both a national and international level. To this, how visions are generated for a global ethic that is actually lived. This, my dear listeners, brings me to the end of my talk. I would like to conclude with Hans Küng's 3 hopes, which underpinned his whole life and work, and which I have had immortalized on his gravestone in the old Tübingen cemetery. I hope for the unity among the churches. I hope for peace among religions. I hope for community among the nations. And I hope that you found my talk informative and that it has helped you understand a bit more about Hans Küng and his unique work and impact regarding the Global Ethic Project. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Schlenzog, for that discussion. And I know that there will be questions or comments, but we'll hold those until the end, until both speakers have had an opportunity to present. So at this point, Reverend Yoshida will introduce our next speaker.
Our second speaker, Professor Whitner, has been working on many social issues, especially relating to World Federation, the peace movement, nuclear disarmament, war, nationalism, discrimination, etc., as evidenced in his resume of about 50 pages outlining his academic and social activities, publishing 9 books, co-edited 4 books, about 400 published papers, receiving many awards, grants, and fellowships. which can be shared with anyone upon request, or read Wikipedia online. The short version of his resume is here. Lawrence Whitner is Professor of History Emeritus at the State University of New York, Albany, where he taught courses on the history of US foreign policy and international history for 36 years. Prior to that, he taught history at Hampton Institute, LaSalle College, and under the Fulbright program at Japanese universities, including the University of Tokyo. He's the author of 9 books and the editor of, or co-editor of another 4, and has written hundreds of published articles. Among his books, most on issues of war, peace, and international relations, is award-winning scholarly trilogy, The Struggle Against the Bomb, Stanford University Press, A History of the World Nuclear Disarmament Movement. He is also a former editor of Peace and Change, a journal of peace research, and has served as president of the Peace History Society, co-chair of the Peace History Commission of the International Peace Research Association, and co-chair of Peace Action International Board. His many lectures in dozens of nations have included talks at the Norwegian Nobel Institute and at the United Nations. Long a critic of nation-state system and supporter of global unity, Professor Whitner has written about the importance of transcending the nation-state and creating a world government in his Struggle Against the Bomb trilogy and in other writings. He also served years ago as vice president of the New York Capital District, UN Association, World Federation Association, a chapter, and more recently as a member of the Citizens for Global Solutions Education Fund Board. Professor Whitner received an AB degree from Columbia College, an MA degree in history from the University of Wisconsin, and a PhD degree in history from Columbia University. He's been awarded fellowships or grants from the American Council of Learned Societies, the American Philosophical Society, the MacArthur Foundation, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the United States Institute of Peace. Dr. Whitner, please.
Thank you very much. For most of human history, the world has been divided into autonomous territories and later nations, separate sovereign nations that have acted in their individual self-interest without showing much or any concern for the common welfare. At the same time, however, there has been a growing realization that adding a global level of governance to the planet could foster a more benign, more cooperative world. The idea of developing a global authority for all of humanity began to be discussed centuries ago by far-sighted thinkers. Among them were Florentine poet and philosopher Dante Alighieri, Dutch philosopher and jurist Hugo Grotius, German philosopher Immanuel Kant, and German philosopher Johann Fichte. In later years, they were joined in their advocacy of world unity and government by the Chinese political thinker and reformer Kang Youwei, Iranian religious leader Baha'u'llah, the French writer Victor Hugo, British novelist H.G. Wells, Indian independence leader Mahatma Gandhi, and German physicist Albert Einstein. Their common theme was the necessity to move beyond a world sharply divided into often fractious nation states to one characterized by greater unity, international law, human welfare, and world peace. Over the centuries, these and other proponents of one world promoted a variety of plans for the rearrangement of global governance. Some plans favored the creation of a unitary world state, but most preferred a federal world government in which nation states would continue to direct their own internal affairs, while a world government, a federation of all nations, would tackle issues of international concern. The violent imperialist scramble of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, culminating in the mass slaughter of World War I, made the idea of developing global governance increasingly relevant to the public and governments alike. In numerous countries, peace movements and even politicians began to call for the creation of a League of Nations to keep the peace. But even though the League was finally established in the immediate aftermath of the Great War, it proved a remarkably weak basis for maintaining international peace and security. The League, after all, was merely a loose confederation of nations, and a veto by any one of them could and did block international action. Furthermore, the US government, wary of any loss of sovereignty, refused to join the League, while the rising fascist powers of the 1930s simply ignored League demands or withdrew from the World Organization. Even so, as the growing international crisis of the late 1930s and the ensuing chaos and destruction of World War II brought the fragile international system to the point of collapse, the idea of world government acquired new momentum. In 1937, the Hungarian suffragist and pacifist Rosika Schwimmer and the American pacifist Lola Maverick Lloyd established the first World Federalist Organization, the Campaign for World Government. Moreover, an avalanche of books and pamphlets addressed the issue, among them One World, a bestseller by Wendell Willkie, the former Republican candidate for President of the United States. Serialized or printed in an abbreviated form in more than 100 newspapers in the United States and Canada, One World sold 2 million copies in book form within 2 years of its 1943 publication date. Even more explicit about the necessity for world government was The Anatomy of Peace, a mordant account of the pathology of nations written by Emery Reeves, a Hungarian refugee journalist residing in the United States. Published in June 1945 and on America's bestseller list for the next 6 months, it eventually appeared in 20 languages and in 24 countries. After the atomic bombing of Japan that August 1945, a massive international campaign for world government erupted in response, often employing the rallying cry of one world or none. In the United States, Norman Cousins, the young editor of the Saturday Review of Literature, sat down on the evening of the destruction of Hiroshima and wrote a lengthy editorial, Modern Man is Obsolete. The need for world government was clear long before August 6, 1945, he observed, but the atomic bombing raised the need to such dimensions that it can no longer be ignored. Becoming a key writer, speaker, and fundraiser for the cause, Cousin turned the editorial into a book that went through 14 editions, appeared in 7 languages, and had estimated circulation in the United States alone of 7 million. With world government groups appearing all over the United States, 6 of the largest merged in February 1947 to form United World Federalists. Determined to strengthen the United Nations into a world government, the new organization had 720 chapters and nearly 50,000 members by mid-1949. A substantial world government movement also sprang up in Japan. Organized by Morikatsu Inagaki, a longtime proponent of the League of Nations, his Institute for Permanent Peace during the month of January 1948 alone held 15 meetings in Japanese cities and arranged for the publication of 14 newspaper articles and the broadcast of 6 radio programs on the idea of world federation. The Institute also worked at producing a world constitution and published a monthly journal, One World. Later that year, Inagaki launched Japan's Union for World Federal Government, which by 1950 had some 4,000 members, organized in 50 chapters. Meanwhile, numerous peace and religious groups, including one by the revered pacifist Toyo Iko Kagawa, announced their support for world government. Furthermore, a parliamentary committee for world federation, founded in December 1949, soon claimed more than 180 members of the Japanese Diet, including Prime Minister Shigeru Yoshida. Additionally, world government activism flourished in France, where the activities of a young American war veteran, Gary Davis, provided an important catalyst for the rejection of nationalism. Having served as a bomber pilot during World War II, Davis watched in horror at what he termed the march of nations toward World War III. He recalled, quote, "A curious phrase beat faintly inside my mind, a phrase which seemed to echo around the globe, one world or none." In 1948, Davis traveled to Paris, pitched his pup tent on a small strip of UN territory, and proclaimed himself a citizen of the world. Endorsements of Davis and of world citizenship immediately flowed in from Albert Camus, Jean-Paul Sartre, André Gide, André Breton, and numerous other French intellectuals, many of whom appeared with him at press conferences or other public gatherings. An estimated 15,000 enthusiasts flocked to one of these meetings, at which Davis talked of the need to abolish the narrow nationalism, which has always resulted in war and death. Hundreds of thousands signed up at Davis's World Citizens Registry. Meanwhile, France's official World Federalist movement claimed over 38,000 members, while some 400 French communities proclaimed themselves mondialized, or world territory. In Britain, where prominent figures like Bertrand Russell and Sir John Boyd Orr, the director of the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, drew crowds of thousands for their public talks on world federalism, Henry Osborne, a Labour member of Parliament, emerged as the movement's most effective leader. Organizing a parliamentary group for world government, Osborne introduced a World Federalist resolution that secured the backing of nearly 100 members of Britain's parliament. He also launched a crusade for world government, that organized World Government Week in assorted cities, held mass meetings, secured favorable coverage in the press, published newsletter and other literature, and attracted some 15,000 registered supporters. Admittedly, World Federalist activism in the late 1940s was weak in communist nations, where it was suppressed, and in third world nations, where issues of poverty and ending colonialism took priority. Even so, small World Federalist groups did spring up in Argentina, Brazil, India, Turkey, Pakistan, Mexico, and the Philippines. By contrast, the movement was strong in North America, Western Europe, and Australasia. In 1950, nearly 29,000 people belonged to World Federalist groups in the Netherlands. In Denmark, a new organization, One World, conducted hundreds of meetings, established local chapters, and by the summer of 1950, had some 13,000 supporters, including members of the Dutch Parliament. The Danish Parliament. In Italy, the Italian movement for European and World Federation claimed 137,000 members by 1949. In Germany, the world government movement burgeoned during the late 1940s. More than 5,000 Germans joined the new World Federalist groups, and 125,000 signed up with the World Citizens Registry of Gary Davis. Naturally, these new movements generated a growing political influence. In Europe, the constitutions of France, Italy, West Germany, and the Netherlands were altered to permit limitations on sovereignty to facilitate participation in a European or world union. In the United States, 21 states passed resolutions recommending U.S. participation in a world federal government. Responding to pressure from United World Federalists, the U.S. branch of the movement, a concurrent resolution was introduced in the U.S. Congress in June 1949, declaring that it should be, quote, a fundamental objective of the foreign policy of the United States to support and strengthen the United Nations and to seek its development into a world federation. Although the resolution never came up for a vote, it secured 111 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives and 21 co-sponsors in the Senate, including two future American presidents, John F. Kennedy and Gerald Ford, a future vice president, Hubert Humphrey, and many future congressional leaders from both political parties. Thanks to the post-war upsurge of global sentiment in a variety of nations, the idea of world government inspired a significant international movement as well. Officially launched in September 1946, the World Movement for World Federal Government could point to some 156,000 members located in 56 organizations by the summer of 1950. Millions of other people around the world, although not members of its constituent groups, were converted to the idea of world government, including an estimated 1 million from 78 countries who had registered as world citizens. UNESCO public opinion polls in 9 nations during 1948 and 1949 found that world government was favored by a majority or plurality of respondents in 6 of these nations: Britain, France, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, and West Germany, and rejected in only 3, Australia, Mexico, and the United States. However, the late 1940s turned out to be the high point of the world government movement. In the following decades, it markedly declined. Setting the official line for the growing communist bloc in the late 1940s, Soviet Foreign Minister V.M. Molotov warned of what he called, quote, world domination by way of world government, while Andrei Zhdanov, a member of the Soviet Politburo, and reputedly second in command to Joseph Stalin, insisted that the real purpose of the world government campaign was, quote, to mask the unbridled expansion of American imperialism. Pravda reported that the program of United World Federalists was, quote, copied from the filthy utopian sketch of Hitler's New Order. Elsewhere in the Soviet press, Gary Davis was denigrated as a, quote, debauched American maniac, while Bertrand Russell was dismissed as, quote, the English fascist Malthusian philosopher. In this hostile environment, early signs of public interest in world government quickly withered in Eastern Europe. Meanwhile, on the other side of the rapidly growing Cold War confrontation, the idea of world government also became increasingly suspect. In 1948, the US Congress's House Committee on Un-American Activities began an investigation of United World Federalists and charged that 16 people appearing in its literature had subversive affiliations. In 1952, a rider tacked onto federal legislation barred the distribution of funds to federal agencies that promoted directly or indirectly what it called one world government or one world citizenship. In accordance with its provisions, the US government removed numerous books from its overseas information centers. Meanwhile, Senator Joseph McCarthy and his cohorts repeatedly attacked the one-worlders, as he called them. Other factors also played a role in the movement's decline. The escalating Cold War, especially the Korean War, which began in June 1950, left little room for ideas of world unity, which seemed increasingly unrealistic. Additionally, the movement was undermined by a sense of exhaustion and escapism. Consequently, the world movement for world federal government shrank substantially, with its larger branch, with its largest branch, the American, losing more than half its membership by mid-1951. Funding for the world movement became so scarce that the small staff at its Paris headquarters sought personal loans to purchase office supplies, and leaders of its student affiliate auctioned off their personal belongings to help to fund the organization. Although the world government movement lost a significant portion of its membership, funding, and momentum it had acquired in the late 1940s, it did not disappear. What remained of the international campaign was active during the following decades and continued to champion globalist policies, sometimes with success. Indeed, it played an important role in promoting international ventures that became realities, including the International Criminal Court, the responsibility to protect program of the United Nations, the Law of the Sea Treaty, and numerous nuclear arms control and disarmament treaties. In addition, of course, the movement kept the idea of democratic world federation alive. Today, the major international world government association is called the World Federalist Movement Institute for Global Policy, and it is composed of 42 member organizations from around the world. Its US affiliate is Citizens for Global Solutions, which educates and advocates for, quote, a democratic federation of nations with enforceable world law to abolish war and global violence in the resolution of disputes, protect universal human rights and freedoms, and restore and sustain our global environment. Over the years, Gary Davis's World Citizens Registry morphed into World Citizen Government with the goal of, quote, building global unity through world citizenship and universal rights. Through its World Service Authority, it issued more than 5 million world passports in the hope that they would facilitate travel across international borders, which they sometimes did. And the various parliamentary groups that sprang up in the world government movements early years became the basis for parliamentarians for global action, an international network of legislators from all regions of the world working for the rule of law, human rights, democracy, human security, and climate justice. At present, there is no consensus among advocates of the world government about exactly how it would be established and how it would function. Nevertheless, the most popular among numerous proposals for world government involves transforming the United Nations, which after all already exists, into a world federation of nations. A democratically elected UN Parliamentary Assembly, World Federalists contend, would be a significant advance over the UN General Assembly, whose members are currently appointed and constrained by their governments. Working together, these two bodies could pass binding resolutions on global issues and strengthen the development of effective world law. The International Court of Justice, the Law Not War campaign argues, could be substantially strengthened by increasing the number of nations that accept the court's compulsory jurisdiction, thereby resolving international disputes peacefully rather than through recourse to threat of force or the use of force. Universal jurisdiction for the International Court of Justice would also significantly strengthen adherence to the rulings of the International Criminal Court. You might be surprised to learn that the US government is not a party to the 2002 treaty that established the International Criminal Court, and therefore the United States is not bound by its rulings. In addition, UN action to maintain international peace and security, the major reason for the establishment of the World Organization, could be enhanced by abolishing the veto in the UN Security Council, or by giving the General Assembly the power to override a UN Security Council veto. And there are also proposals to create an international court for the environment, a World Court of Human Rights, and a UN Emergency Peace Service. Indeed, strengthening global governance is the goal of the UN Summit of the Future, which will be hosted by the UN General Assembly in September of this year. And yet, given the current weakness of citizen activism, of popular activism for the world government, substantial UN reform seems unlikely to emerge from this UN conference. People working for a more cooperative world, though, can take heart that although the movement for world federation today is weaker than during its heyday of the late 1940s, it has the potential for a major revival. One reason for that potential is that in recent decades, there has been rapid globalization of communications, trade, science, population movements, and culture. Increasingly, these and other crucial aspects of modern life have more to do with the development of a world civilization than with the sovereignty of individual nation states. An even more significant factor that might generate a revival of the movement is that the world is currently engulfed in global crises, most prominently the prevalence of war, a growing climate catastrophe, and disease pandemics. And how can these and other ills of the modern world be effectively handled without global action? How can an individual nation prevent warfare, including the drift to a nuclear war, when nations live in a system approaching international anarchy, with each relying on its own military strength to safeguard what it views as its national interest? How can an individual nation stave off the deterioration of its environment when the burning of fossil fuels and its catastrophic consequences constitute a worldwide phenomenon? How can an individual nation institute adequate measures to safeguard public health when diseases spread easily across national boundaries? And how can the immense problems caused by economic inequality, multinational corporations, and international crime be addressed adequately without implementing global solutions? To some degree, public willingness to take global action to cope with the modern world is already shown by the rise of worldwide social movements, the peace movement, the environmental movement, the human rights movement, the public health movement, the labor movement, the women's rights movement, and a variety of faith movements, among others. Yes, admittedly, nationalism remains a powerful force in the world, but perhaps we should regard nationalism as a backlash against modern globalizing trends, including the gradual building of one world. Perhaps, in fact, nationalism is the frightened last gasp of the old as citizens of the world build anew. After all, when we go beyond the ranting of nationalist demagogues to discover what most people actually want, we find that there is broad public support for transcending nationalism. In the summer of 2020, a Pew Research Center poll of 14,276 people across 14 nations found that 81% of respondents believe that, quote, countries around the world should act as part of a global community that works together to solve problems. Only 17% thought that countries, quote, should act as independent nations and pursue their own interests. Another public opinion survey that year, this one by the Swedish company Novus and covering more than 10,000 people in 10 major nations, found that in all of these nations, majorities agreed that, quote, a global supranational organization should be created to make binding global decisions on how to manage global risks. In short, despite the many calamitous territorial, regional, and national conflicts that have blighted the past, a basis remains for moving the nations of the world toward a new era of global cooperation and unity. Perhaps one day, the people of the world will finally see the end of sharp national divisions and the emergence in their place of the kind of government required to ensure human survival in the modern world, a government for all of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Whitner, for that far-reaching overview of the topic of global governments. We do have the opportunity now for all listeners to raise any questions that may have come to mind, or to make any comments that you think are that are relevant here to this discussion. I'm not sure exactly how we'll do that. Can we go into, I guess, a gallery view here? I guess we can. And then people can either just speak up, or perhaps indicate by waving that they would like to raise a question or make a comment. Yes, Mike. You are muted.
Okay. Thank you so much for these the talks and the kind of the historical perspective. It's very interesting, knowing that so much has gone on and there's so much support for the idea of single world government body. I wonder, with all the concern around the climate change movement, how if there is along with that, a movement towards an international body to deal with that issue. And I don't know, with the climate change issue, if there is such a, movement toward among nations to develop that body. There have been the conferences where the agreements have been signed, but is that in itself comprise that international governance, body?
Well, if that question is directed to me, I'll respond. These international conferences have been called by the United Nations, which obviously is the appropriate venue for them, since that's the international or the only sort of international body we have that can discuss these sorts of things on a genuinely global basis. The problem with the United Nations is that it's a very weak institution. It's the decisions reached at these conferences are based on voluntary commitments by individual nations. They're not bound by any kind of international law. If there was a world federation of nations, which could make world law, just as in the United States, we can have national laws that would stop fossil fuel production. So they could do the same sort of thing on the international basis through a world federation, or a whole range of other things. They could develop green energy and solar power and so on a global basis, rather than individual countries just deciding what they want to do, voluntarily doing something. So that there's a difference between law, in this case, world law, and a voluntary commitment.
Dr. Whitner, the Conference of Parties is voluntary, and I think that's what I hear you saying. Is there a movement to? I mean, does the climate change issue spark a greater interest in this global, body that can create, have some power, have the ability to make laws and to consolidate concerns?
There's no such body in existence now. There could be if there was enough popular pressure for it, but that would mean giving the United Nations greater power, assuming this was done by the United Nations. Some separate body could be created too, some sort of world institution for environmental preservation, environmental sanity, or whatever you want to call it. But you would either have to do it through the United Nations, or do it through some new institution. And therefore, again, it's a matter of creating world law. And that means you need some kind of institution that would develop and enforce world law. And it's not there now.
Thank you.
Yes, George.
Yeah, I'm wondering, thank you very much for both speakers and everyone. Obviously, I'm 100% in favor of everything you're advocating. I'm asking whether it would help in the advocacy process if people mentioned more often the principle of subsidiarity, that decisions need to be taken at the appropriate level. Because I think sometimes individualists or nationalists are rather frightened off by the prospect of global ethics, whereas subsidiarity emphasizes that each level is appropriate for a different area of decision making. And as you've absolutely rightly said, there are many things which should clearly be decided at a global level. So I think that principle could be played up more to stop people being frightened that, as it were, more local, personal, national even initiatives would be just overridden by a sort of global super monster. So that's one thing I feel in the advocacy world. The other thing, I think we should probably be honest that at present, we'd like ethics to be harmonized, but the various main schools of moral philosophy and ethics are not yet harmonized into a sort of unified field theory of ethics. And I think there's still a lot of discussion to be done there to enable all religions and other ethical systems to find a harmonious common ground rather than bicker at the margins. So I'm wondering if you agree with that, or if that's a possible way forward. Thank you.
I think that's addressed to Dr. Schlenzau, yes.
Yeah, to both, really.
Okay. We just say only a few words, you know. In 1993, the Parliament of World Religions had this declaration, and it was not called, they didn't say that the declaration articulated the global ethic for the future, but it said it was a declaration towards a global ethic. It marked some elements which could lead us the way to get more global consciousness of global responsibility and global ethic. And so it's very, it's not, it's a misunderstanding that to say, if you say that we, our institute, our foundation, and all the people who are which we are working together, we do not want to define a global ethic, but we say that there are a lot of elements found in different cultures and religions, and also in non-religious tradition and humanistic traditions, which show us a way for a global consciousness, for global ethical consciousness. But we have to discuss it day by day, you know. There's a never-ending discussion, and you have to discuss it on every level of society, you know. It's when we are working in schools, for example, we can't tell the children, okay, this is global ethic and it's like the 10 commandments of the Mount Sinai, you know. We want to enable the young people to understand what means responsibility for their own, responsibility for the class, responsibility for the whole society. And that's that. And there's, and then, so there are rising discussions about what we can do for emerging consciousness of responsibility, etc. Also, we are doing the same we are doing with business people. You know, when we're talking with business people, we do not say you have to do this and to do this, or not this or not that, because that's a wrong misunderstanding of ethic. You know, ethic is no law. Ethic is not our own commandments, you know, fixed for eternity. Ethic today, in our understanding of ethical consciousness, is to be aware of your responsibility and to discuss what in every different fields of action maybe in religion, maybe in business, maybe in politics, what means responsibility. And so we have to discuss it and to find ways to live it, you know. And that's in my opinion, that's the right way to do it, and not to formulate laws or ethical laws or commandments, you know.
In terms of the of governance, there is a goal, of course, to have laws, but and that would be international law. But there's also within the world government movement, there's been a preference for federal world government, that is world federalism. And you'll notice that that term federalism cropped up in many of the organizations that I mentioned. And the reason is that, well, the one you just pointed out, namely that that people don't want total centralization. They're frightened of an all-powerful state, whether that would be, well, certainly on the international level, and justifiably frightened, I think. However, federations have worked fairly well. In terms of the United States, for example, one reason that the US movement was the largest on the world scene was that the United States has a federal system. That is, we have local governance at the city level, sometimes at the county level, and then there are state governments, and there's a federal government, right, a national government. And admittedly, there are some tensions sometimes between the various levels of governance, but nonetheless, for the most part, it avoids conflict or bitter conflict and war between states, for example. There was a civil war, to be sure, but that's really the only breakdown in the U.S. federal system since the Constitution was developed. So for centuries, this federal system has worked fairly well, and there's no expectation that, say, New York and New Jersey will go to war against one another. But there is an expectation that sovereign nations could do that sort of thing and might well do it in the future. So that for that reason, world federalism rather than world government is what most world government advocates support.
Well, thank you. I don't want to hog time at all. I'm entirely in favor of dialogue about morality. I studied PPE years ago, and I run Law and Justice Fora all the time. And it's very interesting to see how law and morality interplay at the moment. And I think there is a danger of vagueness by not spelling out, you know, our moral presuppositions, and so many people have different narratives about what is ethical and moral. And also, I'm fascinated by different constitutions. I agree, federalism has a lot to be said for it. Sometimes people think life is very, very urgent and there is no time to wait for a huge amount of dialogue. But I'm totally encouraged and inspired by hearing you two. That's wonderful to hear how much is going on and that you're both at the forefront of it. So thank you.
Oh, yes, Dr. Yoshida.
You know, the global ethic based on the 5 precepts: no killing, stealing, lying, equal partnership between women and men, and ecological justice. Every nation within the nation, all legal, all admitted. But when it comes to another nation, then the war admits killing, lying, stealing, raping, everything. That's very egoistic. So sure, yeah, we need to go beyond nationalism and need to agree on the basic rules of life. Gandhi said the river Ganges of rights come from the Himalaya of responsibilities. Because we don't observe these basic responsibilities or duties or ethic, Putin invades Ukraine or Netanyahu doing in Gaza Strip. That's because they don't observe no killing, no stealing, lying, etc. So we need to go beyond national boundaries. And we need to really agree upon this basic rule, ethic, or law, which can be the binding law among all nations. Professor Wittner, you are at the board of advising UN Association, and I hope this global ethic becomes a universal declaration for human responsibilities, If that becomes a universal declaration, we can stop wars or, of course, atomic holocaust.
I'm not
So,
on the
is
board
there
now.
any way to advise UN to adopt the Interaction Council's advice to issue the Universal Declaration of Human Responsibility?
I'm not on the board of the United Nations Association, but I am on the board of Citizens for Global Solutions, and of course their focus is on structural change that would lead to a stronger or to a world federation. But the United Nations, as I mentioned in my talk, is having a meeting this September on the future of the United Nations, and I think that people who want to see the United Nations play a stronger role in promoting a global ethic and in enforcing human rights should speak up at that time and urge their members of Congress or other influential figures to speak up at that time and urge the United Nations to play that role. The Declaration of Human Rights, of course, which was issued during the late 1940s by the United Nations, was a major breakthrough along those lines. Unfortunately, again, since it's only a statement of belief, it doesn't necessarily compel nations to enforce those, compel them to enforce those human rights ideals. And again, it's a matter of bringing principles into law.
Yeah, as you suggested, I think we need transformation of the UN, like veto, which is really used nationalistic, national egoism, like at present Putin's claim, etc., or sometimes the U.S. using veto power to protect Israel. So we need to reform it. Now, how can we reform? I think one issue is, of course, the base of grassroots people, the majority, as you introduced, showed us the just 17% agreeing national interest or independent nationalism, but 80 or more percent agreeing more universal global system like World Federation. Though I think next step, hopefully, like Buddhist Sangha, all equal, no governor or ruler, which create dictatorship. That's why I think everybody observing global ethic is important. If they become conscious about it and observe it, no one can start war because it involves killing, stealing, lying, raping.
Yeah, yeah, Dr. Schlensthal.
As I mentioned, the problem of this Declaration of Human Responsibilities of the Interaction Council of former heads of states and governments, our problem with this declaration or with the promotion of this declaration has been that we were not able to find maybe 5, 6 nations, governments of influence to support this document and to bring it to the UN in the discussion of the UN system. And this was a fact, we were not successful. The Interaction Council itself made few attempts to make it, to find that the document finds its way to the UN system, but it was not able. We were in discussion with several governments, but they said, okay, it's quite difficult. We are afraid of the opposition of the human rights movement because they are afraid that responsibilities and rights are that there will be conflict of rights and responsibilities, etc. A lot of complicated discussions, and I had the impression in these years that nobody wanted to. They were afraid. They had problems, and they said, "Okay, it's not the time to do this and that." And so I hope, and I'm a little bit disappointed because I've attended this Interaction Council, their meetings twice or 3 times, and now after the death of Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, we planned a last meeting in Malta 2020, and now I didn't hear anything about this Interaction Council. Maybe they have an office in Canada. John Axworthy makes this office in Canada, runs this office in Canada, but I do not know if it's still active, this Interaction Council. And so I do not know which organization will be able to bring this idea again on in the discussion of the UN. I do not have an answer. But I have a question to Lawrence Wittner. In Europe, we are facing an emergence of the right-wing parties here. We have it in Italy, we have it in Portugal now. Since last week, we have it in Hungary. We will get it. We have it in France. We will get it in France. Nobody knows what will happen in Germany, etc., etc. That's the development in the European Union now. We have it in Sweden. nobody believed that Sweden would be sometime be dominated by a right-wing party, by a nationalist party. It has so long social tradition, social democratic tradition, but it happened. We have the development now in USA. We have maybe we will get you will get Donald Trump again as a president. How do you explain this development? On the one side, you say we have a development of globalization of communication, globalization of this and that movement. I agree with you. We have a lot of grassroots movements who are coming up, in matters of climate, matters of human rights, matters of this and that. A very, very good development, But on the other side, on the political level, we have the movement I mentioned. Do you have an explanation for that?
Well, I'm like you. I'm very disturbed by that trend in Europe, in other countries, in the United States. We face an election wherein one party is fiercely nationalistic and talks about America first and so on. That's a very frightening development. There are various explanations that have been raised for it. Obviously, it's a worldwide phenomenon. One is that people are, or at least some people are frightened of modernity and globalization. Sometimes globalization has harmed them. Factory workers, for example, losing their jobs thanks to the fact that much cheaper goods are being produced with semi-slave labor in other lands. Sometimes the changes in culture, whether that's women's rights or racial equality or shifting gender roles, terrifies people. And so they cling to what they know, and what they know are the traditions of the past. That's been true to some extent throughout history. As people have backlashed against change and been frightened by it. But we're in a time of a very dramatic change. And so I think the very seismic shift we're seeing in globally produced changes is frightening many people. And of course, unscrupulous demagogues now, as in the past, I mean, during the 1930s as well, demagogues used issues to mobilize people to do terrible things, often against their own interests, as people's interests, but they rallied around right-wing demagogues. So it's a long-term problem of change. And the opportunities this change offers demagogues to stir up people who are ignorant or who fear these changes. That's the best explanation I can give you.
Yeah, I actually have, I guess, a comment that maybe is along those lines, or a question. There has been a move away from organized religion in the United States and certainly in Europe, more so in Europe than in the United States. Some of the religious movements in the United States are perhaps not real helpful in addressing some of the problems that we've been talking about. And there also is concern. You mentioned educational programs in the schools to help people understand their human responsibilities and to try to at least discuss ethical mores that would be useful for a harmonious society. well, those kinds of discussions are just the kinds of things that are triggering all kinds of political backlash in the United States right now. There's the notion, at least in some school districts, that anything other than reading, writing, and arithmetic is something that the parents should be responsible for teaching. And when you start talking about morality, then that's something that's not appropriate for discussion in schools. I guess I'm just concerned about the fact that rather than getting more open discussion of these topics, we might be actually seeing less with the decline of traditional churches and with pressure on schools to not offend anybody. Any comments along those lines from either of you, or from? Yes.
We have the same discussions in Germany and in other European countries. We have there's a big wave of secularization, and many people say religion is a private matter and not a public matter, and so on. That was a dogma maybe in the last 10, 15 years in Germany. But in Germany, we have a special situation. We have the religious education done by the main churches, by the Christian churches. We have a little bit. We have only a few communities, Jewish communities, which also have the right to make their religious education in schools. And now we are making a lot of attempts to find ways that the Muslim communities can also practice religious education at schools. Why? Because we understand, we have learned in Germany that religion is a political matter. We have people from different countries of the world, people of different beliefs, and if we want to understand or to find a way for building up a democracy, a good functioning democracy, there must be space that everybody can live and believe what he or she wants to believe. And we have to discuss it in a public area, not only in private. We had the development in the 70s in Germany, in the 60s, 70s, where we got the first immigrants from Turkey and other countries who were Muslims, and the Germans said, oh, they have to stay at home with their religion. They can make their Quran schools only in private rooms, etc. It was a big mistake, because this marginalization of religion, the ghettoizing. So we created new ghettos for religion, and there was no interaction between those closed communities and the rest of the society. And now we have another situation in Germany. We have a big discussion about the role of religion in public space, big discussion about the role of religion in education, etc. Also in Switzerland. They have to find ways to say that it's another matter. There's one matter is the teaching of religion, and another matter is teaching about religion, And we need a lot of teaching about religion, because if we do not understand the beliefs and the way of life of those people, we are not able to make dialogue with them. If we do not understand why they live as they live, why they wear what they wear, etc. We are not able. There are only a lot of conflicts, but there's no dialogue, and that's a reason that we say, okay, it's very important to talk about religion in schools, etc., and in other contexts, also in companies, for example. We have a big discussion in Germany about how can we integrate the immigrants that's now from who come from Syria, from the Near East, etc. Because we need them as workers, we need them as colleagues, they are well educated, and so we have to discuss those cultural and religious matters, And if we are not able to discuss these matters, we will get a problem. And so there's, as far as I see, there's a new development here in Germany and also in other European countries about the role of culture and religion in public life and public space. And I also made this experience last year as I've been in Chicago at the Parliament of the World Religions. Okay, there's the one side, the organized religion, there's big communities, Catholic Church, etc. They are going down, and I mean, many people live their own religion as they want to live. Maybe a little bit Christian, a little bit Buddhist, a little bit this and that, etc. In Chicago, we had at the Parliament, was the 9th Parliament of World Religions, we had more than 7,000 people of over 170 organizations, denominations, etc. More than 170. It's crazy, It's fantastic, And we had a very, very good discussions about global ethic, about the different problems, about the different challenges, global challenges like climate change, like the wars, etc., etc. And there's a paradigm shift, a paradigm shift. The discussions are more made by grassroots level, They're emerging a lot of new groups with good ideas for corporations, for living, for giving, making contribution for their social, for their community, etc. And so I think it's a good development, and especially this it's a good example. This Parliament of World Religions, they started in 1893, then 1993, and so they were more and more people, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating, and it's a very good forum for discussions, these questions: role of religion in society, role of morality in society, and the different fields of life.
I should just add that, of course, in the United States, as many of you know, there's the political right and nationalists have benefited from the attempts of fundamentalists and evangelicals to proselytize and to censor books in schools and demand a variety of things that would lower the barrier between church and state. And this has created a problem. And I agree that it would be a good thing if there was a real dialogue and give and take among religious groups. But instead, there seems to be a sort of religious war going on, a kind of holy war going on that has unfortunately benefited the right wing in the United States, and that includes nationalists.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I appreciated the presentation and this discussion that we are doing about socially engaged, global peace and ethical issues. I find in Canada, for example, we talk sometimes about religion, but we talk far more about culture especially because of the indigenous people who, in fact, right now in Canada, are becoming very actively engaged in communities throughout the country. And I think many of them really probably would share some of the discussions and ideas that both of you raised here in terms of a kind of a federation. And I think about like Star Trek, the Federation, like unity that has tremendous value and ethics, but understand that we are an amazing, diverse world. And for people who are not accustomed to connected with people who are different than them, it's a fearful there is some reluctance, and they can become hostile. That I don't know. I think religion. I was brought in a religion context, but many people are not brought in a religion context. But I think the identity is far more cultural than religious based. And I just would put this to you, like how you see the possibility of a global, socially engaged society. Recognize that maybe it's not just religion. There is other issues that may be very important to address. Thank you.
Well, I'll comment on that then. I grew up in New York City in the 1940s and 1950s, and New York was a very cosmopolitan place, and it was noteworthy, particularly for the large number of immigrants there, many of whom had come to New York during the years before or during the Second World War, or just after the war. Furthermore, the United Nations was established there, and we would have class tours that would go visit it, and so on. So I guess I was in a very unusual situation. People in some little town in South Carolina or Montana and so on might have had a very different experience and have seen and gotten to know people from different lands far less than I did. So I think that interchange with other people who are not like oneself is very useful for overcoming those barriers. But of course, it has to be done in the correct way. To go back to the question for a minute of why is there this right-wing surge politically around the world, I think one thing that all these parties have in common is their xenophobia, their hostility toward foreigners, right? Migrants. And that's true in the United States too. So on the one hand, having foreign people suddenly arrive can be alienating for those with more traditional values, or not used to foreign foods and foreign religions and foreign languages. But on the other hand, it's an opportunity for intercultural learning and development. And it can be fascinating. If I look at how I ended up teaching international history, I have some sense of why. That is, I grew up in that sort of environment. So I think it can go both ways.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I know that Dr. Schlensog had also mentioned the importance of encounter, and I think that's what we're talking about here, the importance of encounter. And I also appreciated that distinction between teaching of and teaching about. I think that's the important distinction that we're missing in so many of these discussions. That if we're teaching something about gender or religion or morality that we're trying to indoctrinate people. No, it's more we're trying to expose people to different ideas so that they can develop and learn. So we have reached the end of our time. This has been very rich. I so much appreciate our two speakers and Dr. Yoshida for helping to make this possible, and of course Mid-America Buddhist Association for hosting this event. Dr. Tempaciter is here, I think, and he will lead us in our ending dedication.
So we want to lead you to share the loving kindness to all beings. First, you set up your mind with goodwill and loving kindness to all beings, and broadcast it as if you're a broadcasting station to all beings, including yourself. Let's do it together. May I be happy. May I be free from stress and pain. May I be free from animosity. May I be free from oppression. May I be free from trouble. May I look after myself with ease. May all livings be happy. May all livings be free from animosity. May all living be free from oppression. May all living beings be free from trouble. May all living beings look after themselves with ease. May all living beings be free from all stress and suffering. May all living beings not be deprived of the good fortune they have attained. All living beings are the owners of their karma, heir their karma, born of their karma, related to their karma, and live depending on their karma. Whatever they do, for good or for evil, to that will therefore err. May there be every good blessing. May the Devas protect you by the power of the Buddhas. May you forever be well. May there be every good blessing. May the Devas protect you by the power of the Dharma. May you forever be well. May there be every good blessing. May the Devas protect you by the power of the Sangha. May you forever be well. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Tempaciter, and thank you for all attending. A special thanks to our speakers once again, and have a good evening or night or morning or wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thank you.